Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today on the HYSKY Pod. I am so honored to have Josh McMorrow, and we are going to learn tons about hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, and GenH2. Josh, thanks so much for being with me today.
Really nice to be here, Danielle. Good to see you again.
Likewise, likewise. I was bummed that we didn't get to bump into each other in Texas last week, but I'm glad everything worked out. So let's just start by a lot of our listeners have heard of GenH2. They're aware of your trailer systems to a certain degree. What they weren't aware of is what the other company was, which was Philomax, and then Path2 H2. So could you kind of just walk us through how those companies are related, which ones still exist, what your role is in them? Because I know I butchered it a few times on flyers and social media posts.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you asked because it's good to get that clarity in the marketplace. So let me start at the beginning. So GenH2 is a company headquartered in Titusville, Florida, right next to Kennedy Space Center. It's about 4 or 5 years old at this point and really came to life because of the research and development that took place at NASA's Kennedy Space Center for more than 2 decades, focused on the ability to liquefy, transfer, and store hydrogen in a way where you can eliminate the losses associated with liquid hydrogen. So that's really how GenH2 was born. The other two companies you mentioned, which are Philomax and Path2 Hydrogen. So Philomax is a company that, first of all, let me just clear this up. Philomax is the old name. We just recently changed the name and rebranded that company to Path2 Hydrogen. That was done at our annual general meeting in August, and we actually just received approval from the commercial register in Munich. And so Path2 Hydrogen is now publicly listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange under ticker symbol PTHH, and is the parent company of GenH2. So earlier this year in 2025, Path2 Hydrogen closed the acquisition of GenH2. And so now GenH2 is a 100% subsidiary of Path2 Hydrogen, and that's sort of the corporate structure. My role is I am the CEO of Path2 Hydrogen. I am based in Berlin, Germany, although I am originally from Houston, and I'm the executive chairman of GenH2.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm sure you said that when you were on HYSKY Monthly, but sometimes, we have to hear things a couple of times before it
No
sinks in.
problem. No
Yeah.
problem. It's not the most straightforward story, so I don't mind telling it multiple times.
Yeah, and I really love the name Path to Hydrogen. I love your logo. It makes a lot of sense now that Gen H2 is under them. And so let's talk about how have you been involved with Gen H2 from the beginning? I'm assuming that you led that acquisition. When did you become aware of them? And kind of a two-part question, how did you become interested in hydrogen?
Yeah, let me start with the second part and I'll work my way towards the first question. So, um, my background is as a lawyer. So I went to University of Texas Law School, graduated in the late 90s, started working as a lawyer in Houston, and I was a trial lawyer at Bracewell. Really liked it. And then eventually, about 5 years in, I was recruited to go in-house at Air Liquide. And so I joined Air Liquide, stayed there for almost a decade, but really that was my introduction to the world of industrial gases. So oxygen, nitrogen, and most particularly hydrogen. So I learned all about the business models behind the creation of all of those industrial gases, how they're used, the pros and cons of each, the challenges and opportunities associated with all of them. And I really was always drawn to the world of hydrogen. The joke at the time, which probably many people have heard, is that hydrogen is always 5 years away.
Yeah.
And I heard that back in 2004. And, I think it probably was a true statement until about, 5 to 7 years ago when I feel like the hydrogen world really started to accelerate. So I've spent the last 25 years, 26 years of my career being a general counsel to multiple publicly traded companies. Air Liquide, upstream oil and gas with Weatherford. I was general counsel and chief legal officer of a company that was in specialty chemicals that was based here in Berlin called Atotech, that was sold to a company called MKS Instruments in 2022. Then I was chief legal officer of Energy Vault, which is a energy storage company that does things in battery energy storage, gravity energy storage, but has also done some hybrid energy storage projects using hydrogen and batteries. So very interesting. During that time, I then was asked to be on the board of PhyloMaxCap. So I was on the supervisory board for a number of years, and you're right. I stepped in and orchestrated the acquisition of GenH2, and then was asked to step into the CEO role earlier this year, and fast forward until today. So, yeah, that's sort of a snapshot of my career. But like you said or mentioned, the world of hydrogen was always fascinating to me. Finding ways to produce it, because it isn't a naturally occurring gas or substance. It has to come from somewhere, despite it being the most prevalent, substance in the universe. It doesn't usually happen on its own. It's usually attached to something else, like water or other chemicals or gases. And you have to sort of pull those apart and find ways to make large amounts of hydrogen. And then in our minds, depending on the use case, liquefying that hydrogen to get all the benefits of density and scalability and pressure and safety and everything else, purity. You put it into a form that really we sort of like to think of as liquid electricity. And you can do so many things with it. And then once you use that hydrogen, the only byproduct is water or water vapor. So it really is an amazing tool that I think the world is now coming to appreciate and find use cases for.
Oh, I love that answer. This podcast is great at coming up with original quotes. And when I had Dr. Martine Rothblatt on, she said the 20th century was the century of electricity. The 21st century will be the century of proticity. And then you just said, and I want to put that like on a shirt. And then you just said, it's liquid electricity. That's very cool. It kind of makes me think of that when I look at your background. Um,
That's
I'm
good.
kind of like I'm seeing these ways. I'm like, yeah, that could be liquid electricity.
Mm.
And you also said something really interesting, which is a key challenge that we've seen in industry, which is that logistical piece of it, moving the hydrogen from A to B. Is that something that GenH2 or Path to Hydrogen is looking at? I know you guys can liquefy on site. Would you like to, transport that hydrogen as well? Or are you more looking at keeping it in like one location where you're going to use it at?
Yeah, well, let me be clear. I mean, Path to Hydrogen and GenH2 are different.
Hmm.
GenH2 has its mission of being a leader when it comes to liquid hydrogen applications. So taking gaseous hydrogen in however it's made,
Hmm.
green, blue, pink, turquoise, gray, however it's made, liquefying that hydrogen and then transporting it, transferring it, and storing it without losses.
Hmm.
Now, if you come up to the path to hydrogen level, and I sort of, like I said, I'm executive chairman of GenH2, so I'm in the business and I'm talking to customers and suppliers and really getting that company in its commercial deployment. But when I step back to the path to hydrogen level, path to hydrogen is really a platform, and our goal is to be the leading hydrogen pure play company that's listed in the world. Now,
Yeah.
those are big words, and I don't take them lightly, but we have already announced a strategic partnership with a geologic hydrogen company called Proton H2. And so I'm looking at all of the different portions of the hydrogen ecosystem. And like I said, probably when I was discussing with you earlier, I'm an energy guy from Texas, so I still think of the energy world in terms of upstream, midstream, and downstream. So GenH2, I think, really does a great job of covering an important part of the midstream ecosystem. But I think the upstream portion of the ecosystem is quite interesting as well. So, you know, GenH2 is the first acquisition that Path2 Hydrogen has done, and we are actively looking at other companies to join our portfolio so that we can have the most compelling technology and equipment and offerings to the hydrogen market.
Hmm. Very interesting. And then what is the mission of Path to Hydrogen? The whole ecosystem, meaning um, production, logistics. Are you looking at PPAs and things like that? What is that overall kind of encompassing mission of Path to Hydrogen?
Yeah, I mean, we have a mission to advance hydrogen infrastructure globally.
Hmm.
Um, there are a lot of challenges, and everyone in the hydrogen industry always likes to talk about the challenges. I really look at them as opportunities. Hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, hydrogen production, hydrogen midstream have been around for decades and decades and decades. And as everyone sort of likes to talk about, up until this point, 99% of the hydrogen has been made by steam methane reformers, which involve running natural gas across a catalyst. And that's great because all of that hydrogen is needed for so many things, including, most people don't know, making diesel. You need hydrogen,
Hmm.
which is sort of counterintuitive. But um, you know, diesel itself is a $1 trillion annual market. And in my opinion, that is sort of the available market for hydrogen to look at. All of those different use cases of diesel or, some derivative of fossil fuels, whether that be for heavy duty trucking, bus mass transit, aviation, as you focus on and others listening to this podcast probably do, maritime shipping, but also things like primary and backup power for data centers and power to the grid generally. Once hydrogen can be produced at volume, and then it can be moved around, which the industry knows how to do, it has a great fighting chance to revolutionize energy in this century. And so I'm very excited to be a part of that. I think it's an amazing growth opportunity. And I sort of look at the world as, no matter what the trend is, whether if you look over the past 20 years, it's been the internet, it's been various things. Right now, data centers is probably taking up all the oxygen in every room. But all of those things come back to energy. How do you power all these amazing things that people want to do in the world? Whether it's, flying supersonic aviation or building data centers for AI or autonomous drive, no matter what it is, you need that the world is always demanding more and more and more energy. I believe that energy should be low carbon intensity. And it's my belief that the best way to get there is through hydrogen.
I could not agree with you more. All of those things you said resonate with me so much. It all comes back to energy. What are your thoughts on nuclear pink hydrogen?
Pink hydrogen. I think that it is interesting. Pink hydrogen in my mind, sort of right now, is stuck in legislative rulemaking
Hmm.
where people are trying to decide, is it worthwhile to make hydrogen from nuclear power, or is that diverting power that should otherwise go to the grid? It's sort
Mm,
of that same sort of chicken and egg problem. I actually think it's a great use case for it. I mean,
I do too.
I still think that I come back to my example of liquid electricity. When you're making a bunch of power for nuclear, you can do certain things with it. You can put it in a grid, fine. But from my perspective, if you want to use some of that power, especially during nighttime or when there isn't as much load on needed for the grid, you can make something that can be stored, transported, and used for other great use cases. So I'm a big fan of that. I'm sort of an all of the above approach for making more hydrogen because the more hydrogen that's in the marketplace, the better. So I'm not a maximalist on green. I'm not a maximalist on pink or blue or anything, as long as we bring lower cost production methods to the market, which make upstream and midstream work. And that unlocks downstream makers of airplanes and ships and buses and trucks to say, okay, well, the fuel is the right price, and the logistics are there. So I'm comfortable, opening new facilities and turning diesel production plants into hydrogen production plants. And so, they're all tied together. So I'm a fan of pink, but it feels a little bit stuck right now in legislative rulemaking.
Yeah, I asked because there are, a lot of conversations going around about nuclear. I've always, as an engineer and as an aerospace engineer, I can't help but be fascinated with nuclear because of the power. It's just so so powerful. So I hope that we see. I mean, there are so many technologies that have, legislative things that allow them to not operate, but we do have some really cool stuff available. So I hope to see that come online. And I'm also, share the sentiment with you that obviously the goal would be green or, clean hydrogen, zero carbon hydrogen. Maybe that's pink, but any hydrogen at this point would be better than none. Because when we were doing like our flight test for our hydrogen powered drone, we had to drive an hour and a half to pick up a tank, an hour and a half back. It wasn't a clean drive. We weren't using an EV to do it. And that was what really held us up. That's kind of what HYSKY was born out of, was us
Mm.
trying to, figure out how to make the fuel cost case to our investors when we wanted to do a hydrogen powered aircraft. And we couldn't answer that question. And so we sort of took a step back and said, why don't we talk to our competitors and see if the other people flying with hydrogen are struggling to find a consistent price and a consistent supply that is even remotely comparable to jet fuel or batteries. And let's see if, that's a challenge they're facing. And it turns out it was. And so that's how HYSKY was born. We pivoted into the nonprofit space and we said, we'll bridge the gap between hydrogen and aviation. And so when looking at those consistent prices and what we would need to see for aviation for the business case to really take off and a lot of money to pour into infrastructure and these sorts of things, I found myself accidentally just in a rabbit hole and researching how have other gases and renewable energies and things done this. And that's when I became aware of PPAs. And I'm very, very fascinated by power purchase agreements, and I want to learn more. Have you ever worked on any or seen those or had any involvement with those? And is there anything that you could share for our audience that probably has never heard the term from a very like kindergarten standpoint? Could you touch on that a little bit and what your knowledge is of a PPA?
Yeah, I mean, I have worked with PPAs in the past, both during my time with Air Liquide, but also, in upstream oil and gas, in other contexts. It's been a while since I've worked directly on PPAs, but my approach to them was more from the legal standpoint. How do I make this work legally and get the contract signed and things like that? I do think that PPAs are important. I don't think they're a panacea when it comes to hydrogen. I think that folks in Europe do like to talk about PPAs quite a bit because it brings certainty to hydrogen sales and delivery, which I think a lot of people are looking for. I think I sort of view PPAs as a stepping stone. I think they're important, but it's not as if PPAs are so necessary for other types of fuels. Because once a fuel is prevalent enough, you don't have to worry necessarily about locking in some long-term price on it. It's really done so that PPAs serve their purpose now because they give producers confidence that there's going to be a market, that there's going to be off-takers for their production. And so that's why it's important to get these projects to FID and move things forward.
And you
But
might say what FID for our listeners. Again, we're from aviation, so I know what that means, but only because I've studied DOE and energy stuff. But I would say most of our listeners probably don't know that term.
Sorry, final investment decision. So
Yeah,
when you have a
thanks.
project, you design this project, you're working on the production, you can produce hydrogen for a certain cost, and then you're looking for a buyer so that you can lock in some reasonable profit margin, and then have a commercial model for what you're doing. And PPAs are great because they tie together producers and buyers on some long-term sales process, so that if someone's going to go try and finance this project, they can say, hey, you should loan me, X tens or hundreds of millions of dollars or euros, because I already have a contract to sell all of this and my buyer is legitimate and things like that. So it's a great way to connect buyers and sellers. But like I said, I think there will come a day, and I hope very, very soon, and I hope to be a part of making it very soon, where there is so much hydrogen being produced that the buyers are feeling comfortable making their own plans, knowing that the product is going to be there at a reasonable price. And so I do think they're helpful. I do think that they're necessary right now, but I think that they're not going to be necessary forever, because hydrogen has the potential to be produced at such volumes that there's going to be fairly standard prices. You'll be able to check the price of hydrogen similar to checking the price of West Texas Intermediate or Brent crude at some point soon, right? We've even seen Plug Power come up with a spot price for hydrogen, which is great. That's a great first step. But I think that's only going to continue as more and more hydrogen comes onto the market.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Plug Power, and I'll come back to that in a minute. How soon do you think it will be that we'll be able to check the price? 5 years, 10 years, 20?
I think it's closer to 5 than it is to 20.
It's
But I
always
would
5
say
years,
sort
isn't
of,
it?
yeah, I know,
No,
I
I'm
know. Getting
teasing.
back to the always 5 years away.
Uh-huh.
That is something where it's going to take, I haven't really thought about what volumes it would take in order for downstream to say, all right, we're unlocked. It's time to go make a bunch of these because we're confident that the production is going to be there and the midstream is going to be there. So, if we make 1,000 trucks, or if we make 100 airplanes, or 10,000 buses, or whatever it may be, that there's going to be enough production and logistics to support that. But I would probably put that in the 5 to 7 year
Awesome.
time frame. I'm sure people could make arguments against that, but that's what I'm seeing.
Well, and you're working on it. So, I mean, I find a lot of the folks that make arguments against it are just critics, and not doers. So I believe the people that are doing it. But speaking of the people doing it, you are one. I mean, we've followed you all for many years, and I've been trying to get that trailer to one of my events for so long. But you guys are so busy and everywhere. Shout out Sue, because she makes things happen. But yeah, I want to ask you about Plug Power quickly. So a lot of people don't know this, but back in, 2020, maybe even before COVID, I think no, it was after COVID. It was right after lockdown. Um, Plug Power was doing some amazing things, and I'm not saying they're not anymore, but they were on, and this is before HYSKY. This was still when I was the for-profit flying with hydrogen aviation in a drone. I was looking for, well, we were working on a patent, and I was looking for a really brilliant engineer to bring on that had more experience than I did. And we were doing a patent search, and we stumbled across this patent that was almost exactly what we had built. And it was pretty innovative. So I was very surprised to see that somebody had done it like 10 years earlier. And so, of course, knowing the person I am, I found out who did it. I stalked him online, found his LinkedIn, his email, his Facebook, and was like, I need to talk to you. Well, we get on a Zoom. His name was Brian Jones, I believe. It's been years now. And we get on a Zoom, and he's like, well, actually, I'm not a free agent anymore. Mind you, his background's totally aerospace. I'm not a free agent anymore. I was hired by Plug Power. And I'm like, why in the world did Plug Power hire you? And, he's like, I can't really say. This is all public now. But then we had him on a guest on our webinar, same one that you were on. And Plug Power was working on their very own aircraft propulsion system. And that presentation was one of the best as far as like on board the aircraft. I mean, of course, I'm biased, but as aerospace engineers that had worked on this for 5 years and then seeing like our exact patent, I knew that Brian had worked on it for a very long time. So Plug Power snatched him up. Then there was another group I was watching. They did like a world record flight. It wasn't in the US. I can't remember. I want to say somewhere in Europe, I think. And the lead of that team, there were some students, I think graduate students. The lead of that team was a woman. I can't think of her name. I wanted to talk to her. Plug Power also snatched her up. So like all of
Uh,
these people that I was finding, Plug Power had snatched them up. Then fast forward a few years, and Plug Power was also partnered with Universal Hydrogen. And as you know, they went under, was that last year? I think it was
yeah.
last year. Um, and so, but there were all these great people doing all these really great things. And then we started hearing a lot of negative things about Plug Power in the news. They might not make it. And I haven't been able to find any aviation stuff that they're doing anymore. So I don't know if that stopped when the universal hydrogen thing happened. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are on Plug Power. Do you see them as a competitor, somebody that's synergistic? And what do you think was going on with their financials over the last couple of years?
I might stay. I'm not gonna. I don't want to grade Plug's papers on financials, but
Okay.
I'll say how I view them. I'm very impressed. So I've met Andy Marsh a couple of times, and when I was at Energy Vault, we worked with Plug Power. Plug supplied the hydrogen for that hybrid system out in Calistoga, California, where it's going to be this backup power system for the town of Calistoga, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. So I've worked with them. You know, their ambition is to be a leader in hydrogen. And it's no small task to go up against the large industrial gas companies that have dominated hydrogen for decades, right? I worked for one, Air Liquide, Air Products, Linde, to a lesser extent, Messer and some others, Air Water in Japan.
Hmm.
But it is a small club.
Hmm.
And Plug really, from my perspective, aimed to break into that club by building a lot of production capacity. They have a really strong offering in the materials handling space where they're
Hmm.
providing hydrogen for forklifts for a
Yeah.
lot of very large companies. Um, but on the back of that, they've built I don't know how many liquefiers in the U.S. over
Yep.
the recent years. So it's been a pretty strong move on their part, and like a lot of hydrogen companies, they went through a hype cycle during COVID, and then their stock took some heat after that. But they seem to have had a recent recovery, as have
Hmm.
a lot of hydrogen stocks out there. I mean, Bloom Energy, for example, what is their stock up 1,000% over the last year?
Yep.
Most of which because their fuel cells can run on natural gas or hydrogen, and they power everything, including data centers. So
Yeah.
um, a lot of what happens out there takes so much hard work in the background, and then there is timing and a little bit of luck mixed in there. But their mission to build out they being Plug, their mission to build out more hydrogen and to sort of break into the ranks of the larger industrial gas companies, I think is quite impressive.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot or make you okay. I'm also a huge fan and supporter of Plug Power and Andy Marsh. I've been trying to get Andy Marsh on this podcast for years, but haven't been successful yet. But what I found out about them not from hydrogen, but from aerospace. And
Mm.
like I said, all of the top people, they were finding them. So they are very smart. Andy is very smart. And I have told so many people when folks are like, well, I want to get involved in this hydrogen stuff. I'm like, well, invest in Plug Power. They're public and I own Plug Power stock. Um, but I guess I should have framed the question as what do you say to people that are like, well, they're not doing so hot. And what I say is I say just wait because I don't think they're going anywhere. And I know they have really, really smart, talented people on their team.
Yeah, look, I respect anybody that is in the arena and trying to do big things. You know, doing all of this is not easy, and Plug, really put their money where their mouth is. They started with a lot of these materials handling agreements, like I said,
Hmm.
building out smaller installations for companies that were using hydrogen powered forklifts.
Hmm.
Good for them. But then they've parlayed that into, very large liquefiers, an electrolyzer business around the world. And, I agree with you. It takes doers. It's very easy to sit back and armchair quarterback the world and make these proclamations that, this isn't going to work or that's not going to work. So, I like the fact that they are pushing hard. They're trying to grow. They're trying to move into new markets. That's what I like to see. And as a CEO of a public company, albeit on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange and not on the U.S. exchanges, um, you know, it's a small club. I can count on one hand the number of publicly listed companies that have as their sole focus a hydrogen business.
Yeah.
Um,
What
and
are
so,
they?
I'm going to miss a few that are out there, but obviously Plug Power is out there. You have Bloom Energy, but Bloom they're a fuel cell maker, and I would venture to guess that a lot of their fuel cells run on natural gas and not hydrogen today.
Hmm.
But they're a great example of that. There's a company called SFC Energy, also in Germany, that does hydrogen powered generators, among other things. Um, Cavendish Hydrogen, which has gone public as a spin-off of a larger company.
Hmm.
They're a small company, but like I said, it's not very many. Then you have the big industrial gas majors, but if you were to look at their revenues and the percentage of those revenues that come from hydrogen, it's pretty small.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't call them hydrogen pure play companies that are out there. And um, I like being at the forefront of that. I like having companies like Plug that are out there trying to push the envelope, talk about hydrogen, have people understand its benefits, and bring more of it to the market.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. You brought up something that, and also you live in Germany. We published a white paper back in 2020. Um, about the white paper was about the feasibility of captive use hydrogen, just making hydrogen on site for aviation, just small aircraft. Um, but in part of that white paper, we looked at who we thought we definitely need to update it. This was also, I believe, in 2020, maybe 21. But we looked at like who we thought were the leading countries in hydrogen, and we did Germany, China, Japan. We should have done Australia. They weren't on our radar at the time. Obviously, the US, but we wrote like a couple pages about how innovative Germany was and that they would probably be the leaders because we were kind of looking at things that have been done, the investments going towards it. Is that part of why you moved to Germany because of the hydrogen activity?
Yeah, I always tell people when I'm asked that question, because they sort of say, well, you're a guy from Texas, and why did you take this company public on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange versus the NYSE or NASDAQ like you've done before? And I would say it's a mixture of opportunity and intention. From an opportunity standpoint, the folks that we were working with, we saw an opportunity to get GenH2 public via Path to Hydrogen, in a way where we could do that relatively quickly, access the equity capital markets, which we think is an advantage if we were able to move quickly. Um, we also think that Germany is a nice place to have a publicly listed hydrogen-focused company because, as I've said publicly before, Europe views hydrogen more from a national security and as a requirement, really. I
Hmm.
mean, it's already in the RED 3 regulations about how much hydrogen has to be rolled out as a percentage of transportation and aviation and trucking and everything else. So it's a great place to, sort of plant your flag as a hydrogen pure play company that is looking to grow the industry. So yes, Germany is backing hydrogen. There are skirmishes all the time about definitions of RFNBO. So it's a
Hmm.
renewable fuel of natural or biologic origin. Sorry if I
Hmm.
messed up the acronym, but
No
something
worries.
along those lines.
Mm.
And so, while all of those things are happening, there is a lot of momentum in Germany, but in Europe generally, to make the hydrogen economy flourish.
Hmm.
Because as natural gas has gone away because of the war in Ukraine and not wanting to get natural gas from
Yep.
Russia anymore, Europe has really sort of decided, if we're going to be energy independent, do we want to trade Russian natural gas for, batteries that are 90% dependent upon China? And
Yep.
I think there's a lot of people in Europe that are saying we don't want to put ourselves in the position again of having this 2023 shock to the system where our main source of power uh,
Hmm.
is sort of pulled away from us for geopolitical reasons.
Yeah.
The
I'm,
great
I'm
thing about hydrogen is that it can be produced almost completely within the borders of one country, certainly within the borders of Europe, such that Europe doesn't have to rely on LNG from the U.S. or rare earth mining from China, or something that is dependent upon whether countries are getting along or
Mhm.
whose administration is in power. And so I think it's a strong push for Europe to focus on hydrogen.
Yeah, that was brilliantly said. I think a lot of people sort of have the idea that I talk to anyway that Europe tends to be, more sustainable or green looking. I mean, and they do share those values, maybe a little bit, more liberal than we are in the U.S. But I think the things that are really driving Europe are geopolitical. There's this guy that he's got a podcast. His name is Nate Higgins. Absolutely brilliant PhD. He brings on all sorts of guests, and all they talk about is geopolitical energy.
Mm.
He brings on like AI guests, and he's had some really known guests. He's grown quite a bit, but I've learned so much from that, and he talks about hydrogen a lot. And I think, here in the US, we just don't see it that way yet. For one, we have a lot of oil and it hasn't really become a struggle. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. What do you think? And I don't know if you want to comment. How do you think the hydrogen ecosystem will play out in the US? I mean, supposedly all of the hubs are getting nixed. I don't think that's officially been verified, but I think it's coming. Um, how do you see the US government playing into that hydrogen infrastructure and production? Or do you see it being more, players like Plug Power and GenH2 that are really going to move the needle? How do you think that will kind of shape up?
Yeah, I mean, it's been frustrating to see hydrogen be somewhat of a political football. I don't, I don't like that. In either direction.
Yep.
It's not the savior of the world, but it's also certainly not, meant to be portrayed as evil or a waste of money. Hydrogen is a technology that I think is beneficial to everybody from an all of the above approach, which I think whatever administration is in power in the US should focus on, energy security and all of the resources that the US has to offer. And I think
Hmm.
hydrogen is a huge part of what the US has to offer, along with all the other things that are out there. But, I would really hope that the world moves more towards low carbon intensity power.
Hmm.
And one of the best ways to do that is producing hydrogen in very, very large volumes that can be used for all these different use cases. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
reason why hydrogen is called, the Swiss Army knife of power, because you can use it for industrial use cases, for
Yep.
making steel, for making all these different things by combusting it. But you can also use it for a fuel, and you can liquefy it, and you can use it for power, or you can use it straight to put into these new turbines that are being created by GE Vernova and Siemens Energy that can run on, today 25% hydrogen, but
Hmm.
soon 50% hydrogen, and then eventually 100% hydrogen. So,
Hmm.
um, I don't like to comment too much or try and bring hydrogen into politics. I would prefer that it be outside politics. I
Yes.
think historically the Department of Energy has, done great work. And I'm not talking about any particular administration, but generally the Department of Energy has helped fuel new sources of energy by providing funding where the private market wasn't willing to do it or the private market felt like it was too early. Um, I like when the DOE does that. I think it will continue to do that,
Hmm.
frankly. And hydrogen should have a role in receiving some of that funding so that the U.S. doesn't cede hydrogen, production and supremacy to other parts of the world. If only for that reason,
Yeah.
I think that the DOE should continue to fund hydrogen projects or hydrogen hubs or whatever we may call it, because I think it's a competitive advantage for the U.S. to lead in all sorts of energy, not
Hmm.
just oil and gas or shale production or LNG, which it does lead in, and that's fantastic. But as we move to a lower carbon intensity world, I would hope that the U.S. continues to be a leader when it comes to hydrogen.
Yeah, likewise. Well said. Um, okay, I want to pivot a little bit and get a little personal. You said, well, it was clear to me the respect that you have for Andy Marsh. And I understand that because when you're doing something that has never been done, you're kind of on this stage and you're being criticized. So for you as a CEO of a public company, talk, and this was not your first public company, correct? You've done it a few
I've
times?
been with multiple public companies. Yeah. First time as CEO of a company, but I've been, an executive of public companies for the past 20 years.
What is one of the scariest things? I know a lot of us like to say, like, well, I'm like, I am a doer, you're a doer, we get things done. But there are times as a CEO myself that's running a nonprofit in an industry that doesn't exist and rallying people together. There are times that are difficult and wondering, is this going to pay off? I know in my gut it will, but sometimes, like, why am I doing this to myself on some days? But then the rewards are very high. So, what are some of those things? What would you say is the most challenging thing that you've had to deal with personally when taking a company public?
Where do I start? I mean, the list is long. I would say sort of trying to, when you have a vision for how you want something to go, whether it be the acquisition of GenH2 or the commercial deployment of technology that not everybody understands or understands the benefit of. Um, it's that journey. And there are days that are maddening when you think we feel like we're doing the right things. We feel like we're explaining this to people, but even though you've explained the technology and the benefits 3 or 4 times, people still come back and ask a question that you think, I feel like I'm
Come on,
starting over from scratch. Um,
story of my life.
and then anytime you're in public company world, things take longer and are more difficult and involve lawyers and accountants, and you have to sort of get the whole orchestra to work together to get things done. Um, but by nature, I'm an optimist, and I believe in the power of action and not just sort of meeting and thinking about things, but making decisions. And sometimes they're going to be the wrong decision, but hopefully, more often than not, they're the right decision. And as a small company, I feel like we have the agility to move faster and more decisively than some of our larger counterparts. So, I always talk about taking ownership of things, having everybody in the company think and act like an owner, and make decisions that are going to make the company 1% better every day. And if you do that, and then a month later, or 6 months later, or 2 years later, you look back, I'm always amazed by the progress that can be made using that sort of prism to look through. So there are frustrating days, of course. But it's very, very rewarding to build a business, um, despite it being a small company on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, and really sort of fighting to have people recognize who we are and what we're doing. I really like being in the arena.
Well, I love that answer. I think that's the second time you said optimist or optimistic today. And I definitely get that vibe from you. I am also that way. And I think we tend to gravitate to one another. We know how to find each other, right? And I think by being an optimist, you even if you're having a bad day, you can't help but do the things. You're still going to see it through. You're still going to show up and everybody's going to think everything is fine, but that's just what you do because you know that vision that you see, it can happen, right? It can happen and we can be very patient. Um, Tell me about you as a teenager. What were you into? Did you play sports? Were you into music? What did you do for fun? What got you into trouble? How have you changed now? Tell me all the things.
Yeah, so I grew up in Houston. I wasn't born there, but you know, as they say, I got there as quick as I could. And yeah, I played soccer. Now living in Europe, we call it football, but I
Mhm.
played soccer my whole life, and this was back in the, you know, late '70s and into the '80s when there weren't a lot of kids in the U.S. playing soccer. But I played all throughout. I played at Jesuit for high school and played there and had a great time. Really enjoyed myself. Played for a short time. I went to Trinity University in San Antonio for college and had a very short soccer career there, but a small one. And I still keep up with the coach, Paul McGinley at Trinity, who's just a great guy. He was the coach when I was there, and he's still the coach today. So that is a serious tenure. But
Very cool.
um, so that's I spent a lot of my time doing that. I've always been into music. I play guitar, taught myself to play guitar when I was in college, and then I really in law school. I just needed a distraction from
Yep.
reading cases all day, every day, and so I. This was in the early days of the internet, and I was able to download tabs for songs, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
just taught myself to play music.
Do you know I have yet to have a guest that is not a musician? Um, and I also am a musician. I play piano, guitar, ukulele, self-taught on all of them. I was trained to play the clarinet. I also sing and rap. Martine is a musician. Dean is a musician. John Piasecki is a musician. And I always, it always, music is always brought up. And I didn't want to ask you. I just wanted to see if it came up. And I'm not surprised. There's something about, I think, good business leaders and optimists and doers, people that I guess sorry if you hear my dog. I don't know what he sees. I might have to edit
I
this
don't
out.
I don't hear it. Your
Okay,
microphone's
good.
doing a good
Okay, I'm gonna
job.
keep going. Um, but there's you surely heard that one. Do you still? Oh my gosh, this mic is really good. I have to put him out. There's something he's barking at. Give me one sec. I'll just edit this out.
No problem.
Kate, you're going crazy. Come on. So, all right, I'm gonna try to pick up where I was. I think I was saying there there seems to be a correlation. I would love to see if somebody has looked at this or studied this between good business leaders, optimists and doers, and I think what like Martine would call the 5%. I don't know if you've heard that whole episode, but she talks about the 5%. Very interesting. Um, and music, because also music is very hard at the beginning. It takes a while before you can jam. You're like, this sounds like
Yeah.
crap, and then you keep working at it. And the next thing you know, you're like, oh, okay, I got this. And, you get that rhythm. And I think that's kind of how leadership is as well. But there just seems to be some kind of relationship between successful people, people that are optimists and always looking on the bright side and trying to make the world actually a better place, and them being self-taught musicians. I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I haven't thought about that before, but um, you know, music is messy. I mean, it's hard. You know, when you're trying to learn a song or write a song, you know, it doesn't start out sounding great, and you have
Yep.
to sort of stick with it. And I think there's a lot of But once you do, boy, that is a magical feeling of
Yes.
learning a song or creating something that didn't used to exist. And I really like that about business. I mean, business is not easy, especially smaller businesses where it's really dependent upon everybody showing up and thinking, we're going to be able to actually get this done. It seems daunting, and maybe others are telling us all these reasons why it won't work. But, 6 months later and a year later and 2 years later, you have a business that people are interested in buying your products and working with you. And, you're making 1 + 1 = 3. And I love doing that. And I love doing that as part of a team. That's just my favorite thing. It's great to have individual successes, but maybe it's from my background in sports, but team successes are so much more fun being
Oh
able to
yeah.
share that with people and tell stories about, hey, you remember when we thought this whole whole thing was going to fail, and we were able to sort of snatch victory from the jaws of defeat.
Yep.
I really enjoy that, and so that's what keeps me coming back. And it's really what had me accept the position with Path to Hydrogen, because this is far from guaranteed. That there are hurdles that get put up every day, but there's also, when you get together with people that see a vision for what hydrogen can be, and they're willing to really do the work and put their money where their mouth is. It's amazing the types of things that can be created, and I feel like it's got a worthy purpose. I'm at a stage in my life where I've done interesting things, and I've really enjoyed being a lawyer and a general counsel. But at some point, you start thinking about what your legacy is and what you're going to leave for your kids to talk about and your grandkids to talk about. And for me, building Path to Hydrogen into something that is bigger than we thought it could be and could potentially change the way that hydrogen is perceived and used and produced and handled in the world. That's exciting to me. I love building teams around ideas like that.
Yeah, that is so cool. What you described almost sounded like building a band. If you're starting a new band, you guys kind of suck, and it takes a while before you learn each other and, kind of who follows who and what sounds good with what. But then you get that rhythm, and now you've got a song, and now you've got a flow, and now people want to hear it. But that is, while you were explaining your team and what you liked, I'm like, this is how High Sky functions, but also when I've been in bands, that's how it is. And it's kind of clunky and yucky at first, but if you stick with it, it becomes a beautiful song, a beautiful set, a beautiful company. You certainly got a great team. I've been so impressed with everybody that I've met at GenH2. So just really cool stories. I definitely get that vibe from you. What I'm curious, what part of Houston did you grow up in? I'm in Spring.
I grew up kind of on the southwest side of Houston. I went to
Okay.
St. Thomas More
Yeah.
for grade school. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I was zoned for Westbury High School, but I ended up going to straight Jesuit. So that part of the world.
So you probably went to Galveston more than I did, or Surf City. I never go because it takes me an hour to get up to the other side of downtown.
Yeah, getting
Yeah.
across Houston is a trip in and of itself.
Yeah. So, funny how you were saying earlier, hydrogen is always 5 years away. Houston is always an hour away from Houston. That's what I've been hearing lately. And I've only lived here for a couple of years, but I really enjoy it. So what would you have done, if anything, different in college or early adulthood? What are some of the things that you maybe not regrets, or do you have any regrets or things you wish you would have done different?
It's interesting looking back. I've been living now in Europe for almost 9 years. First in Switzerland for a few years when I was with Weatherford, and then we moved to Berlin in 2019. And living abroad, it's sort of cliche about it, broadening your horizons and opening you up to new things, but it really has. And I've loved learning a new language, despite German being a very, very difficult language to learn. I grew up speaking Spanish along with English in Texas,
You
and
kind of just
it's
you kind of just inherit it.
yeah, you're sort of forced to do it when you live
Yeah.
in Texas, but
Hmm.
German is a whole different approach. Probably looking back, I didn't go abroad in college, and I wish I had started that journey a little bit earlier. I mean, I
Mm,
really sort of caught up when I got in my 40s, I guess, by, moving for what I thought was a 3-year expat assignment, but then ending up staying in Europe now for another 6 years beyond that. So that's been something that I hope more people have a chance to, even if it's just travel, but
hmm.
really experiencing other cultures and getting to know people and slowing down and understanding that the world really is a small place, and there's reasons people do things the way they do them. I love learning about that. Travel to me is just and new places to visit and cultures are fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. I'm like that as well. I've never lived abroad. I
Mm.
definitely want to. It's on the bucket list. I don't know where I want to go yet, but I have to go to Europe for a while because my dad's from Bristol and my mom's family is also from Germany. So I'm 50% German, 50%, 25% Scottish, 25% British. And I can do a mean British accent, but I can't speak German, but I could probably say a couple of funny phrases. But yeah, I would love to, see my roots there and just experience that because we really are so closed off here, so much more than we think. And, I'm kind of the type of person that believes people are fundamentally good. And that's not what we're really shown on the news or in the media. But I think two strangers are doesn't matter if they speak a different language. You see two strangers help each other so much more often than not. I see it
Yeah.
all the time, and just seeing humanity be human it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, the more you can experience that, the better. Um, what advice would you give to young entrepreneur that is learning about before I ask you that, actually, I have to ask you about aviation. So Gen
Yeah.
H2, and I don't know how much you can talk about this, but I know you have Zero Avia as a partner on the website. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with Zero Avia?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking with them for a number of years. I think probably the best way to talk about, I mean, so ZeroAvia has interest in our hydrogen liquefiers, right? We can provide hydrogen liquefiers, especially to aviation companies, whether you're doing drones or doing small eVTOLs or larger planes. All or most of them are going to want to have liquid hydrogen available.
Yeah.
Even if they're not putting liquid hydrogen on board, you're going to want to store it as liquid and then vaporize it into gas and fill your tanks.
Mm,
Because until you get large enough to have your own supply, or to order a 4,000 kilogram tanker truck to drive up and arrive on your doorstep,
mhm.
there are a lot of places where liquid hydrogen, especially in Europe or Asia or other places, there just isn't liquid hydrogen available to you. So GenH2's liquefiers are a perfect use case for that. But if I were to back up even farther and talk about it, I mean, GenH2 has as part of its company a Korean company that was known as H2 Creo. And H2 Creo, led by Jong Baek, who is now the chief technology officer for GenH2, uh, it is deep into liquid, not just liquid hydrogen, but hydrogen generally for drones.
Mhm.
And at one point, H2 Creo set the world record for the longest drone flight powered by hydrogen. So
Mhm.
that's a little known fact, but
Yeah, I
Gen
didn't know that.
H2's experience and depth when it comes to uh, liquid hydrogen, but all hydrogen for drones is extensive. I mean, I always say this, that Gen H2 is a small company, but punches so far above its weight when it comes to technical expertise for not just liquid hydrogen, but hydrogen generally, how to
Mhm.
store it, how to create it, how to transfer it, how to use it in a tank on board, whether it's a drone or an eVTOL or a truck or something. So there is a massive amount of expertise at the company, which I'm so proud to work with these engineers and scientists that have this background. So yeah, but I mean, we talk with Zero Avia, a lot of other drone and eVTOL companies around the world,
Mhm.
Australia, US, Germany. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few places, the Netherlands, where people are coming to recognize that. I'm just going to take drones for a second.
Hmm.
A battery powered drone can fly for a few hours,
Hmm.
whereas a hydrogen powered drone can fly for, you know, 20 hours.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of applications, commercial and military, for a drone that can be in the air that long without
Right.
having to recharge or refill. So I think it's a space that is only going to grow. And I always tell people, you hear a lot of this talk about what's going to happen in the Arctic and
Hmm.
what would the military and warfare look like up there with all the temperatures being what they are.
Hmm.
Well, I always kind of say, liquid hydrogen's at negative 253 Celsius. So I don't know about you, but I think liquid hydrogen sort of scoffs at the temperatures in the Arctic. It'll
Yeah.
be fine. As long as the other components can survive that, I'm not worried about the fuel.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, very interesting point. So one thing that we like to do is we like to ask you a surprise question that our previous guest asked
Mm,
you. They didn't know who
okay.
you were going to be. And so their question is, what do you tell your 18-year-old self?
Try and do more things. Don't be afraid of failure, because failure is just an opportunity to learn. I think I and many other people spend so much of our youth and young adulthood doing everything we can possibly do not to fail, that we miss opportunities to try things and learn and think, oh, okay, well, that didn't work out, but now I know better. And the next time or 10 times, I'm going to do it this way. So, um, I would say if I were to tell this to my 18-year-old self or my 18-year-old son, I do tell him, don't be afraid to try things. And if it doesn't work, it's fine.
Hmm.
You're not 50 with kids and mortgages and, college payments and all. You're young. Just
Yeah.
if it's something interests you, put all of your effort into it and try it, and don't worry about what other people think if you fail. It's no big deal, because if you're learning, you're succeeding.
Yep, I love that. I was just telling my daughter and my niece, 30 and 16, that I said, I think I came up with a new quote. And I said, if you're scared to do something, it means you're not failing enough. And my point was like, they were working on, it was two different scenarios. One was like having a tough conversation with someone. And the other one was just unrelated. But anyway, I said, have advocate for yourself and say those hard things. And if you mess up or you do something wrong, but again, it goes just back to the music. It's ugly at first, right? It doesn't sound great, but you're not going to get good unless you fail, 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 fail. So it's necessary. It is, in fact, there is only one failure, and that's giving up. That's the only failure that there ever is, because it's all learning. And if you're perfect, you need to be doing scarier things. You need to be doing bigger things, because you need to be pushing yourself past where you are so that you can fail more. Um, okay, now's your chance to
Hmm.
ask the next guest a question, but I will tell you who it is. It's
Okay.
David Smith, the CEO of Robinson Helicopter, who just built and flew, well, modified the first hydrogen powered helicopter that I did
Hmm.
see in person in partnership with United Therapeutics and Unither Bioelectronic.
I would say my question for David, I guess, would be, um, what year will hydrogen aviation reach 10% of the market?
I love it. That's a good one. Love it.
Sort of putting him on the spot. So I
Yeah.
apologize in advance, David, but I'm interested in your opinion on the question.
You know what? We love to put people on the spot, though. I'm just the type of person that I feel like if we can put you on the spot, the answers are more organic. And then if we need to edit anything out, we can. Um, are there
Great.
any last thing I'm going to ask? Are there any last thoughts or last people you want to mention, or companies or partners that you have? Any exciting things in the news that you want to share? Any events?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I couldn't do anything that I'm doing without the team at GenH2. They are a tireless bunch of workers and great people. Greg Gosnell is the CEO there. He and I talk probably 3 or 4 times a day. But all the people, James Fessmeyer, Martha Williams, John Bake, Chris Wallington doing sales. We have Simon Hersey over here now in Europe and Middle East. So I mean, everybody gets up and works tirelessly to make people aware of what GenH2 can bring to the table. But I think we're also creating solutions that make me really proud. I mean, our ability to eliminate losses associated with liquid hydrogen, that is not a small thing.
It
And
is
there's a
not.
lot of noise in the market around, oh, but what about this? And, you know, but our technology really is something that I think enables liquid hydrogen or hydrogen generally to compete with, and in a lot of cases, I think displace diesel.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that will be a step change for the hydrogen industry. So I want to take an opportunity to call out all the great people at GenH2 that are doing amazing work every single day. It's great to be part of the team.
Well, that was just beautifully said. And I will echo that. Your team, I haven't met all of them yet, but I have a feeling I will meet many of them soon. And your entire team, you all are so easy to work with. And I only know a few companies that are like that, that when, we meet, it feels like we've known each other forever. The trust is there. Just everybody's working hard. And that is the feeling I always get from you all. So I appreciate that. I'm so excited to see where you guys go. I'll be promoting like crazy and can't wait to
Thank
do
you.
more with you. Yeah. So thank you so much, Josh, for being my guest today. And you have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you, Danielle. Great to see you.